Welcome to a Nothing from Nothing production. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Christopher with Bill Turley, and this is the Junction podcast, a podcast about growing up in Brooklyn in the 1970s and 80s. We're hoping to protect the names of the innocent as well as the extremely guilty, and there were plenty of those. Well, here goes. Welcome back to the Junction. We're here with Bill Turley. Say hello, Bill.
Hello, Mark. Hello, everyone.
Yes, and we're going to focus on a particular area that's extremely interesting to us, and I'll let Bill give a brief description of this particular subject matter. So go ahead, Bill.
So, Mark, do you consider yourself a beach person?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, when you were a kid, how much time did you spend at the beach?
The entire summer, even if it rained.
Even if it rained.
Yeah,
So, and where did you spend that time at the beach?
about 80% of the time was Breezy Point Surf Club, and 20% was Reese Park.
Okay. Well, today that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a very unique area, unique to the city of New York. And it's a community called Breezy Point, and it's got some different sections to it. And we're going to talk about our experiences in two of those sections anyway. So just to give you an idea what Breezy Point is, we've talked before about how we grew up in that Junction, Flatbush area, Flatlands, Marine Park. Well, right across the Marine Parkway Bridge, past the Belt Parkway. It's over the Jamaica Bay. Um, to the west of that, or to the right of that, depending how directionally challenged you are, is the community of Breezy Point. And that's where Mark and I spent a lot of our formative years.
You were a hoity-toity. You were shitting in Mile High. You were in the town of Breezy Point. I was stuck in a cabana.
You were. So we got to make the distinction here between the co-op and the surf club.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, Breezy Point it was a beach community. Now people, of course, live there full time, but this is where the Irish American community would spend their summers, and it was a very unique place, very beautiful place, actually.
What did they call it? Didn't they have a name for it?
Well, the Irish Riviera,
The Irish Riviera. We got to learn how to say that word, Riviera.
the Irish Riviera. I've heard the land of beads and booze.
Well,
Beads as in rosary beads.
yeah, it was also known as Boozy Point,
Right.
You know.
I worked with a guy who lived in Breezy Point full time. We were messengers in downtown Manhattan. He was very proud to say that it was the biggest beer drop in the nation. And you know,
I'm sure.
it's funny. In the co-op there was a bar, there was a liquor store, and there was a supermarket. And by Labor Day weekend, the only thing left in the liquor store was like a bottle of peppermint schnapps.
I know, I'm sorry. Everything's gone. All the whiskey's gone.
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And your choices for beer back then, which is probably one of the more interesting things about where we were growing up and how we were growing up. It was all American beers, right? It was like Pabst. It was Schlitz, Rheingold, Rheingold, Schaefer. I mean, you had like 8 choices of beer, right? You know? And there was Heineken. Heineken did sneak its way in.
Yes, it was.
And that was because John F. Kennedy had popularized that back in the early 60s. But there was no such thing as like 108 beer styles, right? There was like 10. And you had to like Bud. If you didn't like Bud, you were shit out of luck.
Right. Yeah. You know? But again, it's a very unique place, and it is kind of isolated. So I guess historically, around the early 1900s, people started to settle in there by building bungalows on this very, very narrow strip of land.
Yeah.
And I know my grandparents had a place down there, and I think they probably started to go down there like in the 1920s, maybe.
Oh my God.
And what I was told, I know by a lot of my aunts and uncles, was that the bungalow was originally in Rockaway, which is further east, and they basically transported the building down to.
Listen, all you Irish, get up and get out of here.
Right, and they moved the bungalows down to Breezy Point, and they were very simple, wood frame homes, and again, it was a primarily Irish American community or Irish.
I think it still is, right?
Well, it still is, yeah.
Well, what is the, I don't know what it's like now. It's been a decade since I've been there.
Well, according to Wikipedia, which is not exactly an authority, it's 98.2% white.
And the other 2%, or the other, what is it, 98.2? So that'd be 1.8% Italian.
Well, it's funny you say that because there were not very many Italians in the community for quite a while, up until maybe the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
So, you know, my pedigree is Irish and Italian. And I always heard this story from my aunts and uncles about how when my parents were, I guess, engaged, would be during the 1940s, right after World War II. My Irish grandparents invited their, future in-laws, my Italian grandparents, down to Breezy Point. And, it was quite a stir, I think, because, my Italian grandparents were very old world. They were from Europe. My grandfather wore the black suit and the white shirt and the bow tie and the fedora with the cigars in the pocket, and, I guess they just weren't used to that down in Breezy Point. But, eventually the Italians did kind of assimilate into that
Well, it
community.
was, we describe it accurately, all the civil service folks, it's kind of fair in a way, right? They could afford these bungalows. They
Oh,
were
yeah.
reasonably priced.
Yeah,
The beaches were beautiful, right?
absolutely.
And you had mostly civil service folks, as I recall, at least at Breezy Point Circle, around
It's in firemen.
cops, firemen, sanitation, post office, and it was an enclave.
Oh, yeah.
How long would it take? I mean, it would take you'd have to drive to it. There was no public transportation. You'd have to drive past Flatbush Avenue
Right.
and Nostrand Avenue if you came from the city and drive a good hour or so, 40 minutes across the
Probably
bridge.
about 40 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then you had to go across the Marine Parkway Bridge, which is now, I think, the Gil Hodges Bridge.
fantastic. One of the best managers ever.
And the Brooklyn Dodger.
I saw him to his funeral.
Yeah. And then, but there was the one area where I spent a lot of my childhood was in the Breezy Point Co-op. And those were bungalows that, were really basically summer homes. You could stay overnight there and, the full working kitchen and everything. They were small though. But, you know, uh, uh, once the co-op took over everything, it's this,
You didn't own it, right? You didn't own the property.
you don't own the property, you own the building and you have like 100-year lease on the land.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that's basically how it works.
Is it still the same way like that?
I believe it is. Yeah. It's still,
So it's owned by the collective community, or is there a guy named Breezy that owns all the land?
it's the Breezy Point Cooperative Association, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what's interesting about it is when you come into the co-op, there are different parking lots, depending on where your house is, that's where you're going to park. And then you would walk to your bungalow.
Yeah, there are no streets.
No. Well, there were little streets, but they're walkway streets.
Yeah, sidewalks.
You can't drive cars on them. No.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And there is a boardwalk. And on the boardwalk, you have a place called the Sugar Bowl. I don't know if it's still there, but that was where everybody went, to get refreshments from when they were down on the beach. They had a nice ice cream parlor there, but they also dispensed a lot of beer.
They have some adult beverages. Did they serve adult beverages
Yeah,
there?
yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the road, more towards the bay side, you had what we used to call Market Street back in the day.
Trun.
Yeah, but the way those stores face the main road now, they used to face the other way.
Mm.
And there was a wooden boardwalk back there, and that was what they called it Market Street. There's a supermarket there, and of course the Blarney Castle was over.
And then that boardwalk was called Splinter City.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a ritual.
You never walk barefoot on.
Getting the splinters out of your feet.
It was like, it was not kept up well,
No, it wasn't trucks or anything. No, yeah. And also there was a place called Kennedy's over there.
Yep.
Which was actually the food was pretty good, and
Still there, I think.
yeah, it's still there. And you used to be able to get access to that not only from the bridge, but you could take a ferry from Sheepshead Bay into Breezy Point.
Well, I never took the ferry. I always hitched. I hitched or rode my bike.
Well, that was it, But it was, a very safe, quiet community. They always had big 4th of July celebration there. And the big thing was on Labor Day weekend, they would have something called Mardi Gras. I don't know if you ever
No, I
experienced that. Yeah,
yeah.
they'd have a parade through the streets in Breezy Point, and people would dress up in costume, and it was really the last hurrah of the summer.
You had those two bookends, right? Memorial Day, Labor Day, and you didn't really stay beyond that, no, or before that, really.
Well, you couldn't, unless your place was winterized. They tell you how to get out.
You gotta get out. You
Yeah,
gotta leave.
yeah.
Well, my experience was at the surf club, and the surf club was, what was again? I could talk about fairness. It's like a lot of hardworking civil service
Yeah.
workers were able to get into these cabanas, but I was really struck specifically by the dynamic in the sense that as I keep like a recurring theme in these podcasts is about how crowded I felt in Brooklyn. Right, I always felt like the sidewalks were pushing up, the trees were reaching to get out, the cars were parked on one another, and while Breezy Point had a beautiful beach and you obviously had a little more space, we stacked ourselves in cabanas right next to each
Yeah,
other.
that was the surf club. Yeah.
Yeah, in the surf club, you were in a cabana, which was like the size of this office. I mean, William Turley's a beautiful executive office here, and it was maybe 20 by 10, and it had a little shower, and then you could put a stove in there. And then people would just drink all weekend and just stack themselves into different sleeping configurations.
You really were not supposed to sleep in the cabanas, but
No, you could back then. Back when I was growing up, you were allowed. You'd stay there the whole summer.
yeah.
The whole summer, as Mr. Kennedy would say, I spent the entire summer in Hyannisport. But it was the thing that struck me about it was here we are living this sort of packed, tight existence, subways, Manhattan, New York. And then we go and live on top of each other in cabanas with, all sorts of idiosyncratic people with some lovely people, just like human nature is, and some insane people that would be in different cabanas in different courts.
So I have a question for you. So it was called the Surf Club. Did you know anybody who actually surfed the surf club?
No,
Oh, I said because I did. I knew there was a guy named Eddie who looked like he like.
he's the one guy, Eddie the Surf.
Well, he looked like Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont.
Blonde hair.
Exactly.
I didn't look too far off that guy.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and well, the thing about the surf club is that they had a great like kind of nightclub bar there where they had
Yeah.
a great jukebox.
My band played there.
They'd have live music there, and you had a nice swimming pool there too.
It was an amazing swimming
Okay.
pool, and I used to play shark with the beautiful girls in their bikinis,
Okay.
and so that was my favorite game because you could go underwater and it wouldn't be obvious that you were staring at them underwater. So
Indeed.
I'll leave the particular, I'll leave it to your imagination how much I kept my eyes open to the point where the chlorine would burn.
Good now. So I did say that I spent a lot of my formative years down at Breezy Point in the cooperative area, the co-op area. But how would I know about the surf club? So I've been to the surf club many times because I had friends who owned cabanas down there, and they were allowed to take guests in. So I would always come in as a guest and had a fun time. The beach was great, and you had that swimming pool there, as I said. But the thing was that the guest passes were really cherished. You really you only had
You got like 5 of them. That's all right.
and you
We don't want no riffraff.
save those for special occasions, and so there was always this thing of sneaking your friends into the surf club. Okay. And there was one guy, a good friend of mine I knew back in Brooklyn, who his family had a cabana down there, and the dad was a New York City police detective. And I remember the first time I went down there at his guest, um, there was an entrance gate to the surf club, and he stopped maybe, I don't know, 100 yards or so from the gate, and he was kind of like, "Okay, Johnny, you know the routine." And my friend John got out of the car, and his father opened he opened the trunk of the car, and John got into the trunk, and I guess when we got to the gate, I was supposed to be John, so we wouldn't have to waste and guest pass.
We're like 5 kids stacked in the back.
Yeah,
Back of the trunk.
but they all had passes, but I didn't. I was going to be John. And John was in the trunk, and we would drive through, and his father would check on him periodically. But here's the funny thing about it: was what, I thought about this years later. His father was a New York City police detective, and the car was kind of an old beater, and you couldn't open the trunk conventionally
With
like,
duster.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was maybe like a Ford, Plymouth Savoy or one of those things.
A Rambler.
Yeah, right.
A Rambler.
But here he's got his kid in the trunk here, and you couldn't open the trunk with the key because the lock didn't work, and he would like jimmy it with a screwdriver.
He would jimmy it open and the kid would leap out for a breath of fresh air, you know?
I just, when I think back on it, it was pretty hilarious.
Well, there's a whole class of guys and men of that period. They go, just put a shim in it. You know, it's not set. Just shim that in there. I installed air conditioners once at my house with my father-in-law, and it wasn't going well. And I swear to God, it was like, put a shim in there, and I'll make it go sideways and stack it in. You know, it was like the shim was and then you wouldn't fix things, right? Like that guy would say, all right, just bring it to the auto dealer and get this particular, get the trunk lock. I don't need that. Just go. All you gotta do is take the screwdriver, the jump on, and
Yeah. So anyway, his kid's locked in the trunk here, and he had to jimmy the lock with his screwdriver.
it's funny. But with sneaking in, I always bought a gang, right?
Yeah.
I bought a gang all the time. So I only had the one legitimate pass, and my dad was there in various stages of employment. My mother was working her ass off, right? So I would sneak everybody in, and if you come when you're heading towards the surf club, there was a fence, a big long fence,
Mm-hmm.
and there was one hole that was there for 37 years, whatever. And it was like, it was kid size that had just been expanded. And I still don't understand the motivation of this particular ass. It's like the border between
Going in Mexico.
right. It was like there was like these courts, right? So you had, maybe 20 cabanas on a court, and it was raised off the sand.
Yeah.
And there was, I think that might have been H court or something. And at the
Right.
end of the court was this guy that just sat there all day long. And as soon as the kids would come in to sneak in, he'd blow this up. Well, it was like the one in Planet of the Apes when the apes are chasing him, and then you'd run like mad, and it would be, you know. And I said, what the fuck is this guy's motivation? Well, I mean, why did he give a shit that a bunch of teenagers would be running and bursting in? I mean, like, I still could hear it in my head. And we would run, and I'd go, we very rarely did you get caught. And if you get caught, what would they do? They would just bring you to the front of the surf club, drop you at the front, just get out of here, you're not coming back. And then you just go back, run out
Back around.
and wait till, he's eating or going to the bathroom and sneak right
I'm
in.
trying to remember. Could you come up from the ocean side?
Yeah, but there was a gate and a fence, as I recall.
It was electrified.
It was electrified with that guy with a blowhorn,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember how that was enforced. There must have been 4 or
I'm
5
trying
people.
to remember though. Was there a lighthouse at the end of the peninsula? There had to be something.
Yes.
And I remember people used to talk about some area called Mosquito Land over there.
Oh yeah. It was like, well, there was one time.
Very swampy.
I think I told you this story before. There was an 8 to 10 foot shark that had beached itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it beached itself in 1972. And now this is 1978. And it's still there as a torn up carcass. And kids are kids, it was pushed to the side. But, they would get adorned with flags and people put all sorts of shit in this ditch. And it just stayed there. I mean, nobody fixed the fence. Nobody fixed the trunk. Nobody got rid of the shark. Today would be, get the ASPCA out here. Let's get this shark off the lands. A kid might poke himself with that, right? But back then, it was like, it's a dead shark. Who cares?
I can remember at Breezy Point, you would have shark sightings
Yes.
every once in a while.
Because it's on peninsula, right? Yeah, it's like we're right off the edge there.
Yeah.
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 And
I never went boating over there until Long Island boating, which, I love doing now. But it was, I found it's a mixed bag for me, the experience. And we're going to have other guests as this goes forward to talk about their Breezy Point experience as well as other experiences. But my experience, you have to put it in context. There was the generation gap, right?
oh yeah.
And I had long blonde hair,
Yeah.
and I had
Little soul patch.
I had the little soap.
You had the Dwayne Allman thing.
I had the Dwayne Olden thing going on. I was better looking, and I can't quite sing a blues song as well as him. But anyways,
Better looking than Dwayne Allman.
yeah, I think he got Greg. Greg got Cher Bono, right?
Well,
Yeah, or whatever Cher's real last name is. But I had, so I was immediately an enemy to all the folks, a very
conservative community.
yeah. I mean, like, for Jesus Christ, get a haircut.
Those cops.
Get a haircut, you mixed up kid,
Yeah.
And I would get catcalls from like the drunk folks
Yeah.
at different times, and I just like my father would say, ignore it, you're fine. But I remember also getting very judgmental. I remember this one guy jumping on the roof of a cabana, and there was these courts that were just hardcore 24/7, 365 alcohol oblivion parties, right? He jumps on the roof with the fire hose, and there's this little assuming family of about 8 people who were not partaking in the party, and he starts fire hosing them off their chairs.
Very nice.
Like, oh, look at that fool, knocking them down, and they're afraid of him, And it was just, it was mayhem. You went to certain courts, and it was kind of more of a relaxed family situation, and then there were other courts that were just downright, you better be you come.
And there were different sizes of the cabanas too, right? There was some that were a little more.
There were lockers. Yes, you couldn't sleep in a locker. People did.
Yeah,
Well,
I did.
well, usually you stay. Okay, where's Bill going to sleep tonight? We don't have enough room. We got 8 people in the
Oh,
cabana.
but, you got a picture. There's a refrigerator in there. They had stoves in there too, right?
Some of them.
Some of them, yeah.
And you had a double cabana. You had like you had a TV too.
Yeah, you just,
But it was
they would come out and check periodically, but if they knew you and they knew you were okay, you weren't going to cause trouble.
I slept over. My father slept over.
Yeah.
I remember I remember one time my aunt spraying us down with Right Guard. Yeah, well, we took these little crappy showers. We're in the beach all day. We're drinking beer, and it was like I also remember one time. I have fond memories of my parents there, specifically my father. He was always underemployed at this particular period of time, right? He's had great periods of great employment other times. And so I'm screwing around. My mother and father are sitting in front of the cabana, right? And as they're sitting in front of the cabana, there's this spear guns. So I pick up this spear gun, the spear gun.
They made a real one.
You have real spear gun, right? And I'm holding the spear gun.
Were they your father's spear gun?
No,
It was, imagine your father.
my father was not a spear gun guy. He was a jujitsu
I bet.
guy, but he was not as. So, anyways, I pick up this spear gun, right? And I just like I'm not waving it at anybody, but I'm moving around. And my father, it became a quote. Your brother Tom, who we're going to have on the next segment, used to call me up in the middle of the night, and just say, Mark, don't ever point a loaded spear gun at your mother, you crazy bastard. So with that, we're going to close this first. With that, we're going to close this episode 1 of Breezy Point, and we're going to have multiple guests relaying their experiences of growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s in Breezy Point. Bill, any last thoughts?
Well, we have a lot to cover on this little strip of land, this little peninsula. And yeah, we'll be back with some more stories and some more observations.
And I think there's going to be a little more controversy.
Oh, yeah, there certainly is.
There's certainly going to be. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Say goodbye, Bill.
Goodbye, everyone. See you soon. Just sliding away, written, recorded, and